They sold Unrivaled as a revolution, a power shift, a future without Caitlin Clark, and it collapsed on contact with reality. This wasn't bad luck. This was math. When the hype faded and the cameras turned on, the numbers exposed exactly what this thing was: noise without demand. Look at the rollout. Big claims, loud press, endless media protection. We were told fans were ready for something new, something player-led, something that didn't need Clark. Then the game started. Attendance was thin. Not growing pains, thin, visibly empty seats, curtained-off sections, and camera angles designed to hide the problem. That's not opinion. That's what you can see with your own eyes. Then came ratings. When Caitlin Clark plays, broadcasts spike. When she doesn't, they sink. This isn't debatable. Networks track it. Advertisers price against it. Clark-driven games pull mainstream sports attention. Unrivaled didn't. The viewership wasn't competitive, not with men's sports, not with other women's sports, not even with regular WNBA games featuring Clark. A revolution that can't command eyeballs isn't a movement. It's a press release. Merchandise tells the same story. Clark jerseys sell out. Clark gear moves nationally. That's why retailers stock it. Unrivaled merch barely registers outside niche circles. No lines. No sellouts. No social proof. If fans were buying into this vision, you'd see it in receipts. You don't. And here's the part they hate admitting. Exposure isn't evenly distributed because interest isn't evenly distributed. Caitlin Clark brings casual fans. She brings first-time viewers. She brings people who didn't care before and now do. That's the engine. Unrivaled tried to skip the engine and still drive the car. Union leadership and certain players framed this as empowerment, but follow the money. Media partners didn't overpay. Sponsors didn't flood in. Networks didn't clear prime slots. What? Because they're not charities. They buy attention. Unrivaled didn't deliver it. The hypocrisy is loud. They criticize the very player responsible for the audience they're trying to monetize. They dismiss Clark's impact while relying on the ecosystem she built. That's not bravery. That's delusion with a microphone. This wasn't a mysterious failure. It was predictable. You don't build a product by insulting the market, ignoring consumer behavior, and pretending demand can be negotiated into existence. Fans voted with remotes, wallets, and seats. The verdict was instant. Unrivaled wasn't exposed by haters. It was exposed by reality. And reality made one thing clear. Without Caitlin Clark, the hype had nothing underneath it. The ratings didn't dip. They collapsed. The exact moment Caitlin Clark wasn't involved, viewership fell off a cliff, and anyone pretending otherwise is lying to protect egos. This isn't a slow decline. It's a clean before and after. When Clark is on the screen, numbers spike. When she's gone, the audience disappears. Not gradually, instantly. That's not narrative. That's data. Networks don't guess. They track minute-by-minute viewership. They know when people tune in and when they leave. And what those charts show is brutal. Clark brings casual fans. The moment she's removed from the product, those fans don't stick around to learn the league. They click out. This is where the cope starts. You'll hear excuses about new formats, early stages, or long-term growth. That's nonsense. If the product was compelling on its own, people wouldn't vanish the second Clark isn't there. Strong leagues retain viewers. Weak ones borrow them. Look at broadcast behavior. Games involving Clark get better time slots, more promotion, more mainstream coverage. Games without her quietly slide into lower visibility windows. That's not favoritism. That's business. Networks follow demand, not feelings. Advertisers do the same. Brands pay more when Clark plays because more people are watching. When she's absent, ad value drops. If Unrivaled or any Clark-free showcase truly had pull, sponsors would fight for it. They didn't. And don't ignore the visual evidence. When Clark isn't involved, crowd shots suddenly matter less. Camera angles tighten. Wide shots disappear. That's a production trick used when seats are empty. If ratings were strong, they wouldn't need to hide the building. The most embarrassing part? This drop happens even when the marketing is loud. Even with media hype, protective coverage, and forced narratives, the audience still checks out. That tells you everything. Promotion can introduce a product, but it can't force people to care. Here's the reality no one wants to say out loud. Most viewers didn't come for the league. They came for Caitlin Clark. She's the entry point. She's the bridge from niche to mainstream. Remove her and the bridge collapses. This isn't an insult to other players. It's a measurement of public interest. Sports history is full of this. Every league has engines. The WNBA found one, and instead of building around it, some people tried to prove they didn't need it. The ratings freefall exposed that lie instantly. Correlation isn't subtle here. It's violent. Clark in, numbers up. Clark out, audience gone. That's not a coincidence. That's the market speaking in a language everyone understands, except the people determined not to listen. And until leadership accepts that reality, they'll keep launching products that sound powerful, look empty, and die quietly once the cameras stop protecting them. Empty arenas don't lie, no matter how hard production teams try to hide them. You can spin ratings, you can cherry-pick quotes, but you cannot fake a crowd that isn't there. Watch the broadcast when Caitlin Clark isn't involved. The first thing you notice isn't the play, it's the camera work. Tight shots, low angles, close-ups on players after every whistle. Wide crowd shots suddenly disappear. That's not an artistic choice. That's damage control. Every sports viewer knows this trick. You only hide the stands when there's nothing worth showing. And when the camera does slip. Rows of empty seats. Whole sections dark. Not sold out but late arrivals. Not small but loud. Just empty. Quiet. Flat. You don't need an attendance report to understand what's happening. Your eyes already told you. Ticket pricing confirms it. These games weren't inaccessible. Prices were low. Availability was wide. No sellout pressure. No secondary market buzz. If demand existed, tickets would move. They didn't. That's not bad marketing, that's lack of interest. Compare that to Caitlin Clark games. Completely different visual reality. Packed arenas. Standing room crowds. Fans lining up early. Neutral sites filling up. You see it instantly. No camera tricks needed. The building tells the story before the box score does. And this is where the excuses fall apart. You'll hear, it's a new product, or fans need time. That's weak. Sports fans don't need time to show up when they care. When interest is real, turnout is immediate. Clark proved that. Over and over. What makes this worse is the media overcompensation. Instead of acknowledging the empty seats, coverage zooms in on energy, vibes, and momentum. That's code for, don't look behind the curtain. If the arenas were full, they'd show them. Loudly. Proudly. Repeatedly. But they can't because the fans didn't come. This isn't about disrespecting players. It's about respecting reality. Sports are consumer-driven. Fans decide what matters. They decide where to spend time, money, and attention. Empty seats are a vote. And that vote was loud. The uncomfortable truth is that Caitlin Clark isn't just a star. She's the reason casual fans show up at all. Take her out and the casual audience leaves with her. That's not sabotage. That's behavior. Union leaders and league voices keep talking about growth, but growth doesn't hide from cameras. Growth doesn't need curtains. Growth doesn't rely on tight angles to survive. If Unrivaled or any Clark-free showcase was truly resonating, arenas would reflect it. They don't. And no amount of narrative control changes that. Empty arenas don't lie. They don't care about branding, politics, or feelings. They only measure one thing, demand. And when Caitlin Clark isn't involved, the demand simply isn't there. The biggest lie exposed in this mess is the star power myth. We were told other players had equal pull. Same draw. Same influence. The data embarrassed that claim instantly. If star power were evenly spread, removing Caitlin Clark wouldn't crater attention. It wouldn't empty arenas. It wouldn't tank ratings. But that's exactly what happened. The second Clark wasn't involved, interest vanished. That's not theory. That's outcome. Star power isn't declared in interviews. It's proven in behavior. Do fans show up? Do they stay tuned? Do sponsors pay more? Do networks promote harder? When Clark plays, the answer is yes across the board. When she doesn't, the system quietly pulls back. Less promotion. Worse time slots. Lower buzz. That's the market making a decision. Some players and voices claimed they were just as important, just as valuable, just as marketable. If that were true, the audience would have followed them. It didn't. Casual fans didn't transfer loyalty. They didn't discover new favorites. They left. Merchandise exposes this fast. Clark gear moves nationally. It trends. It sells out. It crosses over to people who don't even watch every game. Other players' merch stays local, limited, and slow. That's not disrespect. That's demand. Social engagement tells the same story. Clips involving Clark travel. They break containment. They reach outside the usual women's basketball bubble. Remove her, and engagement shrinks back to the core audience only. That's the difference between a star and a role player in the attention economy. This is where ego collides with economics. Wanting equal recognition doesn't create equal pull. Media can boost stories. Leagues can push narratives. But they can't force people to care. Fans decide. And fans were clear. The most revealing part is how defensive the reaction became. If the pull were equal, no one would need to argue. The numbers would do the talking. Instead, we got lectures, excuses, and accusations aimed at the very player driving visibility. That's backwards. In every successful league, stars are leveraged, not resented. You build around them. You grow the audience through them. You don't pretend they're replaceable and then act shocked when the product collapses without them. This isn't about personality. It's about proof. Attendance, ratings, merch, and attention all spike with Clark and drop without her. That's the definition of star power. The myth was that everyone had it. The exposure came when reality showed only one player actually moved the needle. And the data didn't just contradict the claim, it humiliated it. What made this collapse even more obvious was the media overpush. Networks and journalists tried forcing relevance, and the audience flat out rejected it. You could see the strategy. Heavy coverage. Constant praise. Framing every game as must-watch. Social feeds flooded with clips and talking points telling fans why they should care. The problem? Fans don't take orders. They respond to interest, not instruction. If the demand was real, the push wouldn't be necessary. When Caitlin Clark plays, coverage follows organically. Highlights trend without begging. Debates form naturally. Networks don't have to sell urgency, the audience creates it. That's the difference. With Unrivaled and Clark free showcases, the opposite happened. Media volume went up while audience response went down. Views stayed low. Engagement stayed flat. Ratings didn't move. That's the clearest sign of under-demand. When promotion outpaces consumption, the product is weak. Networks aren't stupid. They tested it. They gave exposure. They watched the results. Then quietly adjusted. Fewer prime slots. Less aggressive placement. Less buzz. That's how rejection looks in television. It doesn't come with an announcement. It comes with silence. Journalists tried to carry water too. Articles talked about momentum and importance without citing numbers. They leaned on vibes because data wasn't on their side. If the metrics were strong, they'd lead with them. They didn't. Fans noticed. Casual viewers especially. You can't trick them into sustained interest. They'll sample once, maybe twice, then move on. And that's exactly what happened. The initial curiosity didn't convert into loyalty. There was no pull to bring them back. This is where the disconnect becomes embarrassing. Media voices acted shocked when fans didn't show up, as if attention is owed. It's not. Sports attention is earned every night. Clark earns it. Others tried to inherit it. The most telling signal? Comment sections. Viewers weren't angry. They were indifferent. Indifference kills faster than criticism. No outrage. No excitement. Just scrolling past. Forced relevance always fails because it ignores one rule. Audiences decide what matters. Not leagues. Not unions. Not journalists protecting relationships. The overpush didn't build interest. It exposed the lack of it. And the rejection wasn't loud. It was quiet. Empty seats. Low ratings. Weak engagement. That's how fans say no. Until the media stops confusing coverage with demand, this cycle will repeat. Promote hard. Watch numbers flop. Pretend it's growth. But the audience already delivered the verdict, and it didn't need a headline to do it. The contrast couldn't be clearer. The WNBA is growing and Unrivaled is flatlining. Same sport. Same market. Completely different momentum. Start with the league itself. When Caitlin Clark entered the picture, the WNBA saw measurable spikes. Attendance up, TV ratings up, merchandise flying, mainstream coverage expanding. Games moved to bigger arenas. Networks adjusted schedules. That doesn't happen for charity. It happens because demand shows up. Now look at Unrivaled. No momentum curve. No breakout moment. No upward trend. Just a launch, a loud push, and then nothing. Ratings didn't build week to week. Crowds didn't grow game to game. Engagement didn't compound. That's stagnation. Growth has a pattern. You see it snowball. One big game leads to the next. New fans stick around. Sponsors lean in. With the WNBA, specifically Clark-driven games, that pattern is obvious. With Unrivaled, it never appeared. This kills the excuse that the audience just isn't there yet. The audience exists. We've seen it. They show up when the product gives them a reason. Unrivaled didn't create one strong enough to hold them. Look at scheduling behavior. WNBA games featuring Clark got upgraded windows, better promotion, and crossover attention from mainstream sports media. Unrivaled didn't earn those upgrades. It didn't force networks to adapt. It was accommodated, then quietly deprioritized. Merchandise tells the same story. League-wide sales surged off Clark's popularity. Team stores benefited. The ecosystem grew. Unrivaled didn't create spillover. No halo effect. No visible lift. That's the sign of a side project, not a growth engine. The most revealing part is narrative collapse. When numbers grow, the story writes itself. When they don't, the story turns defensive. That's what happened here. Instead of celebrating momentum, coverage shifted to explanations and patience requests. That's what stagnation sounds like. This isn't about hating innovation. It's about results. The WNBA is proving that star-driven growth works. Unrivaled tried to bypass that reality and paid for it with irrelevance. One path followed consumer behavior. The other tried to lecture it. The market rewarded one and ignored the other. That's the difference between growth and stagnation. And pretending they're the same only delays the inevitable lesson. You don't grow a league by denying the engine that's already pulling it forward. The Clark effect isn't a vibe. It's not a storyline. It's measurable, repeatable, and massive. And that's exactly why it makes people uncomfortable. Start with attendance. When Caitlin Clark is on the schedule, arenas upgrade. Teams move games to larger venues. Sellouts happen faster. Standing room crowds show up. That's not coincidence. That's demand responding to a name on the ticket. Take Clark out, and attendance snaps back to baseline immediately. Now ratings. Clark games don't just lead the WNBA, they dominate its attention. Broadcast numbers spike when she plays and collapse when she doesn't. Networks know this. That's why her games get pushed harder and placed better. Ratings decide programming, not opinions. Merchandise might be the most brutal metric of all. Clark jerseys don't sit. They sell out nationally. They trend. They get reordered. Retailers don't gamble shelf space on hope. They stock what moves. Compare that to the rest of the field. Limited runs. Slow sales. Minimal reach. That gap isn't marketing failure. It's consumer choice. Then there's social engagement where excuses go to die. Clark clips travel outside the women's basketball bubble. They hit casual sports fans, debate shows, and mainstream feeds. Likes, shares, comments explode. Remove her, and engagement shrinks back to the core audience only. That's the difference between relevance and containment. Even sponsorship behavior follows the pattern. Brands attach themselves to Clark games because visibility multiplies. More eyes, more impressions, more return. That's why ad rates rise when she's involved and soften when she's not. Money follows attention every time. What makes this undeniable is consistency. It doesn't matter the city. It doesn't matter the opponent. The Clark effect shows up everywhere. Same spikes. Same sellouts. Same buzz. That's how you know it's real. And this is where denial gets exposed. If impact were evenly distributed, removing one player wouldn't change the system this dramatically. But it does. Instantly. Across every metric that matters. This isn't about worship. It's about recognition. Leagues grow through engines. Clark is the engine right now. Attendance, ratings, merch, and engagement all point in the same direction. You can argue narratives all day. You can protect egos. You can pretend balance exists. But numbers don't care. And the numbers are screaming the same thing. Caitlin Clark isn't just part of the growth. She is the growth. This whole mess comes down to one fatal mistake. Ego over economics. Pride and politics took the wheel and basic business logic got shoved in the trunk. In sports, the rule is simple. You follow demand. You build around what works. You protect the engine that brings in fans, money, and attention. That's how leagues grow. But instead of doing that, key decision makers chose ideology over income. Caitlin Clark clearly moves the market. Attendance spikes. Ratings jump. Merchandise sells. Sponsors pay more. Those are not subtle signals. Any competent business would double down. Promote harder. Center the product. Expand around it. Instead, we saw resistance. Public dismissals. Side projects designed to prove independence. Messaging that downplayed the very player driving visibility. That's not strategy. That's insecurity. Union leadership and aligned voices framed this as empowerment, but empowerment without revenue is just symbolism. You don't pay players, staff, or partners with pride. You pay them with money. And money only comes when fans show up. Look at the choices. Resources poured into ventures with no proven demand. Media pressure used to force relevance instead of earning it. All while the clearest growth driver sat right there, producing results that were ignored or minimized. That's politics, not business. The market punished it immediately. Fans didn't follow the narrative. They followed interest. When Clark wasn't centered, they left. Ratings dropped. Seats emptied. Sponsors cooled. That's the cost of letting ego override economics. The most damaging part is the false confidence. Acting like the audience will adapt to whatever leaders decide. They won't. Sports fans are ruthless consumers. They reward what excites them and abandon what doesn't. This isn't about favoritism. It's about leverage. Every successful league understands this. The NBA had Jordan. The WNBA has Clark. You don't dilute that. You scale it. Choosing pride over profit didn't make the league stronger. It exposed fragility. It signaled to fans that leadership didn't understand them, or worse, didn't care. Economics are unforgiving. They don't bend for politics. They don't wait for feelings to catch up. They deliver feedback in empty arenas and falling ratings. And that feedback was loud. Ignore the engine. Protect egos. Push narratives. That's how you stall growth, and that's exactly what happened. Fans didn't choose sides by accident. There was no organized boycott. No secret agenda. Viewers followed excitement, and they walked away from narratives. This is the part leadership keeps pretending not to understand. Fans don't watch sports to be educated or corrected. They watch to be entertained. They watch for tension, skill, moments that feel bigger than the game. Caitlin Clark delivers that. Consistently. When she plays, there's buzz before tip-off. Clips spread instantly. People argue, celebrate, react. That's engagement. When she's not there, that energy vanishes. Not because fans are spiteful, but because there's nothing pulling them in. Narratives tried to fill the gap. Messaging about the movement, the future, and shared spotlight. That doesn't move casual viewers. They don't feel loyalty to concepts. They feel loyalty to moments. And Clark creates moments. You can see the choice in behavior. Fans didn't tune in out of support. They tuned out. They didn't buy tickets to make a point. They stayed home. That's not activism. That's apathy. The loudest signal was how quickly fans followed Clark from platform to platform. College to pro. Arena to arena. Broadcast to broadcast. They weren't attached to a logo. They were attached to a player who made the product exciting. And when some players and voices positioned themselves against that excitement, fans didn't hesitate. They picked the side that respected their time. This isn't a gender war. It's a value exchange. Fans give attention. In return, they expect entertainment. Clark delivers value. Narratives don't. The comment sections made it obvious. Viewers weren't angry at the league. They were confused why it seemed hostile to its biggest draw. Confusion turns into disengagement fast. Choosing sides wasn't emotional. It was practical. Fans gravitated toward the version of the sport that felt alive. The other version felt forced. That's why ratings split. That's why arenas split. That's why momentum split. People didn't reject women's basketball. They rejected being told what they should enjoy instead of being shown why they should care. Excitement wins every time. And the audience made its choice clear, not with slogans but with silence where the hype was supposed to be. There was nothing mysterious about this failure. No bad timing. No unlucky breaks. No hidden sabotage. This was predictable from the start because Unrivaled ignored the only proven growth engine in the room. Every warning sign was visible. The league had momentum driven by Caitlin Clark. Attendance was rising. Ratings were climbing. Merchandise was selling. Casual fans were finally paying attention. That's the moment you consolidate, not splinter. Instead, Unrivaled launched as if star power didn't matter. As if demand could be redistributed by messaging. As if the audience would automatically care just because they were told this was important. That assumption collapsed instantly. The numbers never lied. From day one, viewership stayed low. Crowd stayed thin. Engagement stayed flat. And none of it improved with time. That's how you know the foundation was wrong. Real growth compounds. This didn't. What makes it worse is that the blueprint was right there. Center the engine. Amplify the draw. Use Clark's gravity to lift everything around it. That's how sports ecosystems grow. Instead, leadership tried to prove independence from the very force driving relevance. That wasn't courage. It was denial. You can't build a product by pretending the market doesn't exist. Fans already told you what they want. They showed up. They tuned in. They spent money. Then they stopped when the product stopped exciting them. Unrivaled didn't fail because people hate women's basketball. That excuse is lazy. The WNBA's growth proves there is demand when the product connects. Unrivaled failed because it refused to connect to what actually works. This wasn't about innovation versus tradition. It was about results versus rhetoric. One side delivered measurable impact. The other delivered speeches. And markets don't reward speeches. The final verdict is simple. Unrivaled ignored the engine, bet on narratives, and paid the price. The audience didn't need time to decide. They decided immediately. Until leadership stops fighting reality and starts building around proven demand, this cycle will repeat. New launches, big talk, empty seats, predictable, avoidable, and entirely self-inflicted.